In this tutorial, I'm going to create this homage to Disney Plus's Obi-Wan Kenobi series, or more accurately, the opening title. Before all you mad Star Wars fans start shouting at me in the comments, yes, I know it's not an exact replica, but it's what I've come up with so far and I quite like it, so we're going to run with it. Okay, on the timeline, I've got the Fusion comp that I was working on, so we'll have a quick look at that in a minute. But first, this. How mad is that? Here's me sat in a little cupboard making random videos on YouTube and 1,000 people subscribed. I'm kind of a bit mind blown by that because I don't think what I do is that kind of important. But anyway, thank you very much is all I can say. If you've just discovered me and you're not subscribed, then please feel free to subscribe and let's make that number a bit bigger. But yeah, for the 1,000 people that have already subscribed, a huge thank you. It's much appreciated. It's nice to know that I'm not just sort of talking to myself. Anyway, on with the show. Here is what we're kind of going to end up with. It's kind of less scary than it looks, I suppose. The main star of the show is this box here, which is a group. It's just grouped for convenience. Inside this group, we've got the main text, which is actually a 3D text. Outside the box, you've got some rectangles and backgrounds here, which are going to make the lines when you get towards the end. We've got our lines here. So this is this section. The Star Wars text is here. And this section here is a mask, basically, which reveals the Obi-Wan. And then we've got our particle system at the end, which is the sort of smoke that goes across the screen. And then at the end, you've got a fast noise, which is used to make the star field. But we will go through it step by step, and then you'll see what's happening. So, first things first, grab a Fusion comp. I'm going to grab mine from my favorites down the bottom, which is where yours should be if you watch me regularly. If yours isn't there, make sure your effects library is turned on. Come to effects, and it's here at the top. Click the little star, it'll bung it down here on your favorites, and then you can find it anytime you want. So I'm going to right click, we're going to change the clip duration, and we're going to make it 10 seconds. Put your playhead over it and go into Fusion. So I'll work through it in stages. The first thing we're going to do is the 3D text. So to make our 3D text, we need a 3D text node, which is up here in your hotbar. With your 3D text node selected, click on the merge node, the camera node, spotlight node, and render. This is your basic 3D scene. What we can now do, for the time being, we'll just use one viewer. So come up to the top of your viewers here where you've got this rectangle and just click, and that just makes one viewer. We can now drag the merge node into the viewer and we can see what we've got, which isn't very much. Navigating around your viewer, if you press and hold the control key and scroll your middle mouse button, you zoom in and out. If you press and hold your alt key and press and hold your middle mouse button, you can spin around. If you just press and hold the middle mouse button, you can sort of drag. So when you see me doing all these things, that's what I'm doing. Okay, so to our text. Select your text node, come to your text field, and type in what we want. We have our text. Oh, no, we don't want that. We want that. So first thing, we need to get it looking something similar. The title text, so we need to change the font, and the closest available font is called Albertus. Albertus is a paid font. However, there are demo versions, which is what I'm using here, available for free, and I'll link in the description so you can find the font. The other font that I use is the Star Wars font. Again, I'll link in the description so you can go and get that. So we've got our text. We're going to come to the extrude and we're going to extrude it by 0.05. We're going to add 0.01 to the bevel depth and width. And at the minute it doesn't look any different because we've got no lights on and you can't see any shadows. So if you come to the top of your view where you've got this circle, hit the little down arrow, pick shadows, and now everything goes black. And the reason everything's gone black is because our spotlight is right up against the text and we need to move it back to light our text. So click on spotlight, come to transform, click on use target. This keeps the spotlight pointing at the same point regardless of where you move the spotlight to. And we're going to start pulling it back. And what I'm going to do is hit controls. I'm going to change the decay type to quadratic and I'm going to drop the decay rate a ways down. And then I'm going to continue pulling my spotlight back until I've pretty much lit the whole thing. And then we can bring the decay rate up so that we get a sort of nice drop off at the edges. Next thing we're going to need to do is make our text look similar to the text used in the title. And to do that, we're going to need to add a material to our text. Now you can't add materials directly to the text. So you need to select the text node, shift spacebar and type replace. And you're looking for replace material 3D. And now we need to make our material. And for that, we're going to use a shader node. There's lots of shader nodes, but the one we're going to use is Blinn. Now, the Blinn node will let you build a material. So we start off with a blank canvas, as it were. So the first thing we're going to want is the color. So bring in a background node, put it in the viewer. We're going to go from solid color to gradient. We're going to change the start and end points. So we're going to start at x 0.5, y 1, and we're going to end at x 0.5, y 0. So now we've got a nice vertical gradient. So now we've got the gradient, we need our colors. What I did was I brought in a picture. So just for the time being, I'm going to go back to two viewers so that I can also see my Blinn and my background. So what I did, select your background. You've got it as a gradient, so select your first point on your gradient, come to your eye picker and pick one of these sort of colours up here at the top of the letters kind of thing, and then pick the second point and we'll do the same and pick one of the colours down the bottom of the letter, so you get a slight gradient from darker to lighter. Come from the output of your background, right click and drag and drop it on the Blinn, and you get this little drop down menu of all the inputs, and we're looking for diffused color material. So we've got this so far. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come into my color picker and exaggerate these a bit by making them darker, so drop the value so that the top becomes darker. And we can maybe make this a bit lighter, just so that we've got an obvious sort of gradient going on. This is all personal preference. You need to mess about with this and get the kind of look that you want. So somewhere around there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add, if you look at the original, the Obi-Wan text is mottled, it looks a bit worn, so we're going to replicate that. To do that, bring in a fast noise, and we're going to crank up the detail, we're going to crank up the contrast, drop the brightness and warp the scale up to about 50. We're going to pipe this fast noise, so select fast noise, shift space bar and type create, and you're looking for create bump map. You can just start to see the mottled pattern in this, so we will increase the height scale to make it a bit more obvious, and then from that, space bar and type bump map or bump, and we find bump map, which we can look at here. Again, if we play with the height scale, we can get the kind of lumpiness that we want. And once we've done all that, again, right click on the output of bump map, put it on the blin and pipe it into bump map material. Now, if we take the output of our blin and drop it on the replace material, we can look at our text. And if you zoom into your text, you can see you've got the color and you've also got the sort of roughness that we were after. So now we've basically got our text, our Obi-Wan Kenobi text. The only thing we need to do is come to the render 3D, and we can put that into a viewer, turn on lighting and shadows so that it's viewable or visible, and then select camera, go to transform and start pulling your camera back a bit, and you get that your text comes into view. And you just need to pull your camera back so that it's roughly where you want your text to be. So looking at that, I'm not happy with where the light is, so I'm going to pull that back a little bit more, just so I don't get that. What we can also do, you notice there's quite a big highlight in the middle. We can try and pull the angle of the light up a bit. These are all things that you can play with as you're going along. We can also come into the blin and we can drop the specular intensity to make it a bit less shiny. Something around there. Again, play with the settings, find what works best. So basically we want this to sit in the middle of our scene. So if you click in your window and press Command and G, this brings up some outlines, some guides, and as you can see, our text currently sits on the guide, so we want it down a bit. To get the text down a bit, we're going to move the camera up effectively. So select your camera, come to your Y-axis, and just pull it up until your text sits kind of in the middle, like so. Pull it back a little bit. What you can also do to emphasize the 3D is you can mess with the focal length of the camera. So come to controls, significantly reduce the focal length of your camera, and then go to transform and bring your camera back in until our text is back at the right size. And what you notice happening is that the inside edges of the 3D text become more apparent. Cool. Part 1 done. That's kind of our 3D text. So what I will do now, much as I did in the example, select the whole lot, press Ctrl and G, group them, press F2, and just rename it so you know what the group is. Okay, so we've sort of done with the 3D stuff, so we can move on. I'm going to go back to a single viewer and I'm going to put this in the viewer so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is put in the lines either side. To make the lines, I brought in a background node which I coloured sort of the shade of the top of the letters. So again, if we go back to 2 viewers, we can turn the guides off now, we don't need them, put the background in. Now if you come to your background node, come to your colour picker, kind of aim for one of these top colours. We're now going to add a rectangle. I'm going to make this rectangle really thin. Oops, not thin that way. Thin that way. And just for now, we're going to merge it onto our Obi-Wan text so we can see what we're doing. Grab your rectangle, go to the little doohickey and pull it up. And keep an eye on sort of this here value. So if we go to about 0.6, we can tweak this later on. Maybe it might need to be a little bit higher, maybe 6.1. So that is 0.11 above our midpoint. So we're going to duplicate this. Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And we can merge those and replace that to our merge. This second rectangle needs to come 1.11 below our midpoint, so that will be 0.39. And that way we should maintain our symmetry. The Obi-Wan's slightly off looking at that. So we maybe need to bring the 3D text down a little bit. So if you just double click your group, come to your camera, and then just drop the Y a little bit so it sits a bit more central, like so. Now, to get the tapering ends on my lines, what I did was after each of the background nodes, I added a blur node. So select your blur node, uncheck lock X and Y, and bang up the X blur and drop down the Y blur. And now if we look at our lines, you can see that they're tapering off. So now what we can do is come back to our rectangle and we can adjust the width so that we get our lines coming roughly where we want them, sort of over the O. So again, with the bottom one, I'm going to do exactly the same. Unlock X and Y, bang up X, drop Y, and then increase the rectangle to the same length, which was 0.65. So now if we view what we've got our main text with our lines fading above and below. The final part of this is the Star Wars text here. We are going to add in a regular text node, type in Star Wars, and we're going to find the font, which is SF Distant Galaxy. As I say, I'll leave a link in the description so that we can use the same fonts, merge it on. You've got your text, you need to come to your text node and drop the size down a bit. I think in the original example, we have a quick look. So your text is sort of coming from the edge of the W as far as the N. So come to your text, come up, and you want your text to sit on the line. Drop it down so that it's roughly where you want it. Color wise, we're going to use the same color as our bars. So with your text selected, color picker, hover over one of your bars and you're in. What I'm going to do, I'm going to click on these three dots and just uncheck checkered underlay for a bit so I can see what I'm doing. So what we also see here is that the bars are truncated either side of our text. So to do that, we're going to bring in a rectangle mask. This line here is our top bar and this line is our bottom bar. Now if you apply a mask to a merge node, it will only mask whatever's coming into the green foreground input, which is our top bar, which is what we want to mask. Just take the output of your rectangle onto the blue mask input, and now you can see this top line has disappeared. We actually want it the other way around, so come to the inspector and click invert. Now you can position this how you want it, bring the sides in, and what you end up with is this effect here. You can maybe juggle the text a little bit if you're not happy with exactly where it is, but you basically end up with our final sort of title. Okay, so we've got all our text and everything set up. What we need to now do is have this reveal as the particles come across. So to get the reveal, what we need to do is effectively mask everything here. So I'm going to bring in a background node. I'm going to make that background transparent, and I'm going to merge the output of all this, which is this merge here, on top of it. So what you've now got is your bars, your Star Wars text and your Obi-Wan text all coming into the foreground of this merge. And it's just sat on a transparent background, like so. Now, if you remember from a minute ago what I said about masking, if you apply a mask to this merge node, it will only mask whatever comes into the foreground, and that's what we're going to do. The simplest way of doing it is to get a rectangle, pipe it in, and this will now mask whatever's coming into here, like so. So we want to again invert the mask. We're going to make the mask, the height's kind of irrelevant, but we'll make it kind of full screen, and we will make the width more or less full screen as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to animate this mask so that it comes over and reveals our text while the particles are blown over them, so it looks as though the particles are sort of revealing the text. Now at the moment we're getting a very sharp edge and it's very straight and it looks kind of horrible. So we can do a couple of things to change that. One of those things is we can select our rectangle, we can come to soft edge and we can soften it up a bit, which looks better, but it's still a kind of boring straight line, which I don't like. So what I did was I displaced the edge of this mask. If we view this in a viewer, you can see we've got the soft edge, but you've still ultimately got a straight edge. So we need to change that straight edge. We need to displace it. And to do that, we will use a displace node. So again, shift space bar, type displace, and we're looking for displace, add. Now what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect our rectangle. We're going to pipe the rectangle into the yellow input of the displace node, and then we're going to pipe the displace node back into the mask input of our text. At the minute nothing seems to have happened. That's because we've got nothing driving the displace node. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in a fast noise, which is what will drive our displacement, pipe it into the green input of our displace node. Now I'm going to put up my fast noise over here, and if you watch the displace node here, if we keep the detail fairly low, increase the contrast, drop the brightness a bit. Now if we come to our displace node, if you're on 16 or 17, this will be a drop down menu. On 18 it's buttons, don't know why. You want the type to be XY, and we're going to displace along the X, so we're going to increase the X refraction. And what you notice is as we increase the X refraction, this straight line is no longer straight. So now all we need to work out is how wobbly we want it. So come back to your fast noise and you can start to increase the scale to get some sort of edge that you like or you think will look good, revealing your letters. Again, at the minute this is static, nothing's changing. So what we can do is just bring the seed rate up a little bit. And now what you find when you're playing is that this edge changes. So I actually think that's probably a bit too much scale, so we'll drop it back a bit. Till I get something that I kind of like. Again, it's all about the playing. So now if we come back to our merge node, you can see that you've no longer got a sort of straight edge on your rectangle. You can still animate it, but it's masking different parts of the letters. So now if we zoom out a bit so I can see what I'm doing, again we can bring it so that it's long enough. So you can set your rectangle in the middle, come to frame 0, and add a keyframe. Actually, I'm not going to come to frame 0, and I'll explain why later. We're going to come forward to frame 15, and we're going to keyframe center X. Frame 15 for me is half a second, so if you're on a 24 frames a second timeline, it'd be frame 12. 60 frames per second is frame 30, etc. I just have to be on a 30 frame per second timeline. So we're going to start at frame 15 with a keyframe on the center. We're going to come to frame 210. And we're going to pull this all the way over so that it's off the screen. And if you watch this edge here, you can just make sure that you're far enough over that you've cleared the letters. So now when we play this, if you watch in the viewer, it chugs along a bit, but it will get there as it comes over. It starts to reveal the text, but you've not got this sort of harsh line. This edge is sort of constantly changing with the fast noise. And away it will chug. This starts to get a bit intensive on your machine. I'm not on a supercomputer by any stretch of the imagination. I'm on a 3-year-old Mac that on a good day is not the fastest in the world. Be patient, it will get there. So we've got our text set up, we've got our reveal set up. The next thing we're going to set up are the particles. The particles had me running around in circles for a while, trying to get a look that I liked. I tried all sorts of using the text as the source of the particles and one thing or another, and never actually got anywhere fast. So this is the particle system that I ended up with, and I'm going to cheat here and do that. So what we've got here is our particle system, and I will talk you through it. What we need to do is take the output of this stack of nodes and just merge it over our last merge. And if we view that, we should have some particles. How have we got this particle set up? Okay, a particle system needs 2 nodes minimum. You need a particle emitter and you need a particle renderer. They work as a pair. If you're missing one, it won't work. It can also have other nodes in between. So in this instance, if I zoom in a bit, you can see we've got our particle emitter at the top, we've got our particle renderer here, and in between we've got a p-turbulence node. What the p-turbulence does is it takes particles that would normally run in a straight line and jiggles them all around to make it look a bit more like smoke. So how are they set up? This took a while, so I'm just going to run through the settings. Selecting the P emitter, I will come back to the controls. The first thing you need to set up is the region, and the region is set to line, and this line is here on the edge of the screen. So you set your region to line, you set your start X offset to -0.6, and you start and your end X offset to -0.6. This takes it just off the edge of the screen. The -1 and +1 are arbitrary. They're kind of just enough to kind of go above and below the text, but you can sort of play with those if you need to. So this is where our particles are coming from. The next tab is the Style tab, and the Style tab tells you what kind of particles you're using. In this instance, I've kept them at point, With point, you can't change the size, you just get little dots, lots of them, and you work with that. In my color controls, again, I picked a color that was kind of out of the background scene. I didn't add any variants, and I haven't got any color over life. I've just got solid color particles. The next tab you come to is your controls, and this is where we need to set a few things up. What I did was I came to the start of the animation. I went to number and I set it to 5000 and set a keyframe. I then came in to about 185-ish, dropped the number of particles to 3000 and set a keyframe, and then I went forward one frame and dropped the number to 0. So what that means is, at the start, this line is emitting 5000 particles per frame. By the time it gets to frame 186, it's only emitting 3000 particles a frame. So the particles start to fade out. And then one frame forward, I turn the particles off altogether. That allows any particles that are already generated to drift across the screen and fade away. Coming down, you've got number variants. For some random reason, I've got it at 53.5. I don't know why, because that's going to make no difference whatsoever against 5000 particles. Play around with this. A couple of thousand either way of your 5000 will change slightly the appearance. Lifespan is how long a particle lives for. So particles generated at frame 0 will disappear by frame 100. And again, it's another way of keeping your particle numbers in check, so they're not spawning and just staying alive. They will disappear and let other particles replace them. Again, lifespan variants, some will last a bit longer, some will last a bit shorter. The other control to look at is the position variant. Particles by default are all emitted from the same place. So if you have particles coming across your screen, they'll all be in a line, which obviously doesn't look good. So just tweak your particle variant and it will break that line up and allow, again, a bit more of a natural smoky look. Next, come down to velocity and set it to 0.1, a velocity variance of 0.1. Now what happens is the particles are emitted and they go across the screen basically. 0.1 seems to be a reasonable speed, otherwise they end up shooting across the screen and it doesn't look quite as nice. The angle that they're being emitted at, so the direction they're going in, is 0, which happens to be in the right direction, so coming from left to right across the screen. So that's our P emitter. Our P turbulence is what causes sort of smoky, swirly effects. These are the settings I landed on. So an X strength of 1, a Y strength of 0.449. The Z strength doesn't really matter because we're only working in 2D. P renderer does exactly what it says on the tin. It renders your particles for you. I haven't changed any of the default settings in here. So at this point, this is kind of what we had. Next, you would add a blur node, and this blurs your particles so that they don't look like particles, they look a bit more like smoke. What the blur node does is it tends to reduce the brightness of the particles as well. So to sort of counter that, I've just stuck a glow in. So the blur was set to 11.8. Glow, I brought the glow up a little bit. Otherwise, it's all pretty much default. The last thing I did was I did a color corrector to get rid of that brightness. The first time I did this, it was all sort of garish oranges and yellows and stuff. And then I looked back at the trailer video and the colors are very much muted. So color corrector does just that. I've massively dropped the saturation tweak the brightness down a little bit. So that's the particle system. If we now look at everything together, I will speed this up because it will chug otherwise. We start to get our smoke coming in, and then the reason I put our text reveal at frame 15 is just to delay it a little bit. So now our text should start to come in. You just see it behind the smoke, and as your smoke drifts across, you see more underneath being revealed. So at this point, the number of particles are starting to reduce, and they'll stop, and then whatever particles are left will drift across and fade away. And that's pretty much your basic effect. From here on in, it's kind of cosmetic stuff. Once I've got the particles in place, the only other element I added was a star field, and again, that's purely optional. To get the star field, bring in a fast noise, put it in the viewer, and what you're going to do is you're going to crank up the detail, you're going to crank up the contrast to about 12, you're going to drop the brightness down to about -8-ish. I'm going to go -10 and bring it back. And you're going to jump up the scale to about 50. Now, if we bring our brightness back, you can start to see little stars appear. How bright or otherwise you want those is up to you. I'd suggest fairly faint. If you then add some very slight seethe, you'll see that the stars are twinkling. So even that's too fast. So seethe rate of about 1.5 or 0.015 is probably enough. And you get this very delicate twinkling stars. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the output of our merge that's under our particles and put it on top. So take this output and merge it onto your fast noise. Like so. Now, if you view your fast noise, what you notice is that all your blur stuff, like the edges of these bars, is all messed up. I don't know if this is a bug in 18 or whether it's just the way the alpha channel from the fast noise interacts with the alpha channel from the blurs. I don't know what it is. But after much digging around, I found the cure was to come to the color, go to gradient, and basically have your fast noise set to gradient rather than two colors, and then everything seems to work again. Like I said, I haven't got a clue why. So the last thing that I did was, even with the colors that we've used, they're still a little bit bright. So what we can do, if we double click on our text group, select our spotlight, go to controls, and we can bring the intensity of our spotlight back a bit. But I also want to lose some of that color. Remember what I was saying about sort of desaturating the particles? It's the same kind of thing. But again, I ran into a bit of a problem in that, in theory, I should be able to trace all the way through this path and find, okay, all the text and everything is together by here. If I stick a color corrector after that, like so, view the color corrector, and everything just disappears, and I don't know why. So what I ended up having to do, what I realized was that the color corrector seems to work okay, providing it's not after a merge node. So I took my color corrector, popped it here. I can view that. I can do what I want with it. I can drop the saturation and all that kind of stuff. So I then had to select the color corrector, press Command and C to copy it. And now I had to paste an instance of my color corrector wherever I wanted the color correcting. So top bar, select blur node for your second bar and press Shift, Space and V to paste an instance of this color corrector. An instance is basically an exact copy. All the controls are linked. So any changes I make to this color corrector are going to happen to this color corrector. So with that in mind, I can select this color corrector, change it, and every other color corrector that I instance will also change. And that's basically what I did. So I needed to correct the top and bottom bars. I needed to correct my text. So select text, Shift, Control and V to paste another instance of our color corrector. And then select our 3D text, Shift, Control and V to paste a third instance. Now if we view everything together, I can select this first color corrector and I can make the changes I want and it will affect everything. So I can drop the saturation. So you've got some vague color, but it's much less pronounced, it's much more subtle. We've already color corrected our particle, so we don't need to do that. So that is your title. You come back to the edit page. You see this nice red bar. It will, in time, turn blue. There's a lot going on. It may take a while. So here we are cached. If you now hit play, you have your revealing title. Hope you liked it. Hope you found it useful. Please do feel free to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Put a comment in if you want to. If you have anything you want me to do a tutorial on, stick it in the comments. I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.